Hi all, and welcome to Tom's Dojo. I'm your host, Tom Carroll. Today we're going to be making kolaches. If you've never had a kolache before, you're in for a huge treat. These are sweet yeast rolls with a little well in them and a dollop of sweetened cream cheese and fruit compote and sprinkled with streusel crumble and then baked to perfection. I don't want to mislead you. This is really an intermediate baking project. However, if you have big kolache spirit and about 4 hours to spare, you can make these delicious pastries. Let's get baking. For a list of ingredients and a written recipe, see the video description below. Let's begin by making some dough. You'll need 1 cup of whole milk warmed up in the microwave on high for about 15 seconds. You don't want it to get hotter than 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Add 2.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Normally we would wait a few minutes for the yeast to bloom, but I've been baking with this yeast and I know that it's alive and well. Next, add 1/2 cup of granulated sugar and stir that into the yeast and milk mixture. Add 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Next, we're going to add 1/2 cup of unsalted butter that's been melted and cooled. We don't want it to be so hot that it kills the yeast. Add about 1/2 of the butter. And then to that butter, add 3 egg yolks. And go ahead and stir that around, scramble it up. Set that aside and add another cup or so of those 2 additional cups of all-purpose flour. Add the butter and egg yolk mixture to the flour. Add a little more of the flour. And then 1 teaspoon of fine sea salt. And finally the rest of the flour. The most challenging aspect of this recipe is how sticky the dough is. You'll want to use liberal amounts of flour, at least a couple of tablespoons, on the bench so that the dough doesn't stick to the table. You'll probably need a dough scraper, and you'll see me bring one out in a moment. It's a plastic dough scraper. They just cost a couple of dollars at the kitchen store. The dough scraper will help you to handle the dough and then also to scrape the bench. So I'm going to put a little more dough, a little more flour, on top of the dough. And I'm going to start kneading here in a moment. But it's so sticky that I need that dough scraper. And I'll scrape it off and then use it to move the dough and push and pull the dough. That's the kneading. When the dough gets a little too sticky, I'll put a little more flour on from time to time if it starts sticking to the counter. And eventually, if we keep pushing and pulling, occasionally adding a little bit more flour, but moving it around on the table, the dough begins to lose its stickiness. It becomes just a little tacky and it becomes velvety smooth. It's really a pleasure to work with that dough. I've been kneading about 8 minutes, and that's how long it'll take to look about like this, probably 5 to 8 minutes. It should be smooth, soft. See, it's not sticking to my fingers anymore. It's just slightly tacky. Put it back in the bowl. And then you want to cover the bowl up. You can use a tea towel or some plastic wrap, whatever. You want to let the dough rise for between an hour and a half until it doubles in size. So this has been rising for about an hour and a half. The next stage, we want to portion the dough into 15 dough balls. I have a scale here because I find this is easiest. I'm not so great at judging how much things weigh, but I'm going to put use my bench scraper just in case. And I put a little flour on the table in case anything starts to really stick, but it doesn't. The dough is just right. It's been worked just right. So the 15 kolaches weigh about 60 grams a piece if you're going to weigh it. Try my dough. Oops, about 120. It's about half of what it needs to be. Cut it in half. That's about 55. And then I do a couple of more guesses here to see if I can get it up to the right weight. And I get close at 60. Let's see, what do I end up at? 59. And I leave it at that. Now make a ball. You just fold it together. You fold it up on the side. See how I'm taking each edge and folding it. There we go. Folding it up like a little satchel. And then you put it on the table and roll it around a bit and it becomes a ball. This dough is pretty forgiving. It's pretty easy to work with. It's soft and it stretches well. So I got about 15 balls in all here, 15 dough balls. It took about 10 minutes to do. Rolling the dough, and I had one little tiny blob of dough left over after all those 15 kolaches. Next, I'm going to brush them with 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And again, just a few seconds in the microwave. We don't want to get too hot with it. And I'll cover that. I just used another sheet pan over the top of that, and I'll let it rise for about an hour. Preheat the oven to 375 degrees. Next, we'll be making the filling and topping. Unfortunately, I forgot to hit record, and so I didn't get this section. So you want to make the egg wash first by combining a tablespoon of milk and an egg yolk. Whip them together with a fork, and later you'll be applying that to the top of the kolaches using a pastry brush. Next, we'll make the cream cheese filling. For this, we'll need 1 8-ounce cream cheese block set out to room temperature so it's warm and soft. And 4 tablespoons of powdered sugar, 1 egg yolk, and the juice of a half of a small lemon. And you just combine those ingredients in a mixing bowl and stir them vigorously. Whip them up until they're creamy and smooth so they have the same texture as frosting. Then we'll make the streusel crumble. This is quite simple. You just take equal parts of granulated sugar and flour and combine them with 2 tablespoons of butter. You mash the mixture together with a fork until it resembles a crumble. And you can see in the bowl down there, it looks like little crumbles or clumps of granulated sugar, butter, and flour. Finally, we have the fruit filling. For this video, I just used Marionberry and peach fruit spread that I bought at the grocery store. You can use jam, marmalade, or make your own compote. Prune and poppy seed are popular traditional fillings. Now let's shape, fill, and top the kolaches. They've been rising for about an hour. Next, we want to make a well in the middle of each of the kolaches using our 2 fingers. It's a pretty simple technique. Just poke your fingers down and stretch the kolache out. You want to make big holes. Then you spoon in the cream cheese. I got a little too excited and over scooped the fruit, and I had some blowouts, as you'll see in the final shot. Then I had some peach fruit spread. Then I'll lightly brush the outer rim of the kolaches with that egg wash mixture. It would have been more efficient to do this before adding the filling. We'll sprinkle the streusel crumble over the top. This goes into the oven that's preheated to 375 degrees. I put it in for 10 minutes and then watched it and then reduced the heat to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for the remainder of the bake time. Once your kolaches are done baking, pull them out of the oven, cover them, and cool them for 20 minutes before serving. The kolaches should be light brown on top. Here's the final product. Looks pretty good, except for there's a few of those fruit-filled kolaches that are overfull, so they've spilled over the side, but they're still tasting really good. Just how kolaches should look and taste. Cheers! Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you have a comment or you would like to share how your kolaches turned out. If you liked what you saw, give the video a thumbs up, share with your friends, and ring the bell by the subscribe button to receive notice of future episodes. There's a written ingredient list and the full recipe in the description of this video. Also at the end, there's a list of some really interesting kolache bakers who've been profiled in short YouTube videos. Happy baking! See you next week in the dojo.